Thank you so much once again for everyone for joining us this afternoon. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us, which is the usual worldwide greeting. We'll go ahead and now hand it over to Shelly Johnson. Go ahead and just do a brief introduction for us, and then I'll go ahead and have Dr. Siedschlag join us afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, I am Shelly Johnson, and you might see my name on the screen as Michelle Johnson. I answer to both. I am here I'm Senior Director of Philanthropy. I work really hard at getting our alumni re-engaged with their alma mater. And I do that for the College of Arts and Sciences. And I am just pleased that you are all here today with us. I'd like to invite you to, in the chat section, I've already put my email in. It's johnm172@erau.edu. I'd like to invite you to learn more about ways you can get engaged with your alma mater. We have a new council that we are inviting alumni to serve on, industry experts as well. We are looking for support for research, and we're looking for those who like to mentor students, the next generation, paying it forward. We are creating a new council, like I talked about, that's the Virtual Collaboratory for Security and Resilience, Education, Research, and Engagement. This will be a virtual hub that brings together faculty, industry partners, students, and government agencies to develop educational and research solutions for homeland security, emergency management, human factors and resilience, and safety management, and so much more. Like I said, I put my email in the chat already. I would love for anyone that has any interest in learning more, if it's mentoring a student, if it's serving on the council, if you want to talk about ways you can re-engage with your alma mater, email me and I'll answer those questions and we'll get you going. And without any further ado, there's lots of other ways to get engaged as well. But those are some of our pressing needs, is working with the students serving on a council. If Dean Siedschlag is ready, I think I'll give a little brief introduction. Dr. Alexander Siedschlag is our Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences for Worldwide. He's been with us about 18 months and has just done great at jumping in feet first into really engaging our students and our current alum in getting back involved with working together, getting involved. Dr. Siedschlag is a man that travels extensively, and he is wonderful to work with. I enjoy my time working with him quite a bit. And without any further ado, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Alexander Siedschlag. Are you working yet?
Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible now. I had some technical issues, but I was able to hear your last sentences, and thank you, Shelley, and let me return the compliment. It's great to work with you. So welcome, everybody. As you know, at least by now, I'm Alexander Siedschlag. I'm the Dean of the Embry-Riddle Worldwide College of Arts and Sciences. It is great that we are able to contribute a special occurrence of our Resilience Reimagined series on the occasion of homecoming. So good to see you all. Good to see you back. This is wonderful. Resilience has been defined in many ways at the global level, in particular in the context of the Sendai framework within the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Program. But at the national level in the United States here, it has been defined as part of the Homeland Security Vision, where the Homeland Security Vision is obviously, as you know, it's all hazards, whole community-based, and the Homeland Security Vision is to foster preparedness. Yeah, resilience comes next. So Homeland Security Vision, very important, to foster preparedness in order to accomplish a resilient nation. And as you can see, emergency preparedness and responder well-being, preparedness, foster preparedness in order to accomplish a resilient nation, very important. And you see that Homeland Security Vision reflected in today's presentation title. And that is not a surprise, because our two presenters here will be two very esteemed faculty colleagues. Ray Chang, who is Associate Professor in the Department of Security and Emergency Services of our Worldwide College of Arts and Sciences, and also is the Program Coordinator for our online Master of Science in Emergency Services. Welcome, Ray. Thank you. And then also Joel Billings, who is Assistant Professor in the same Department of Security and Emergency Services at our Worldwide College of Arts and Sciences, and he is the chair for the online Bachelor of Science in Emergency Services. So this is going to be a very important and insightful presentation. Also to note that Ray and Joel also, among other things, have a career as a professional or volunteer member of they are both firefighters, so they have that in their history, so they definitely know what they are talking about when they're addressing emergency preparedness from the first responder point of view, other than that they are great scholars in their field. So I would encourage you, as any questions already pop up in your mind as Ray and Joel are presenting, if you would already leave them in the chat so we can collect them, but there will also at the end of the presentation be a Q&A session. Thank you, Brianna, also, as always, for organizing this. Thanks again, Shelley, for the support of alumni and development. And let's kick it off here and pass on the floor to Ray and Joel, please.
So my presentation first. So hello, everyone. Welcome to join us. It's my pleasure to present in this event. So actually, this presentation is a shorter version of the keynote speech I made for the Aircraft Rescue and Firefighting Working Group Annual Conference this year. So again, so for most of you, Embry-Riddle, we are really famous for the aeronautical science. So we are also, although I research emergency management, we are trying very hard to combine the two things. So in this presentation, I'm going to share my experience. As Dean introduced me, I was a fire officer in Taiwan for 6 years, and I also did 1 year internship in the Phoenix Fire Department. So when I worked in Taiwan, I actually, I started with a position called lieutenant for a fire station. So I started from a very fundamental, manager for a fire station. Then later, I kind of like become an emergency manager. So I plan for next slide, please. Thank you. So you can see these two pictures. I actually wrote the emergency operations plan for the subway station. So if you look at your picture on your left-hand side, this is the actual picture during the rush hour. So see how many people on the platform. So this station is on the, second floor below, the ground. So they create many risks in my jurisdiction. Not only that, to accommodate so many people, there are about 500,000 population in my jurisdiction. We need to dig the tunnel to link the neighboring cities, right? So I also need to write the emergency operations plan for the longest tunnel in Taiwan. So the tunnel is about 8 miles in length. So right now, if you check the Wikipedia, it's the 9th longest tunnel in the world, right? So because of this experience, again, I started as a very, the first line manager, fire station manager. So in that time, I focus on the, dealing with the emergencies or small scale disasters. I look at the SOPs. I need to become familiar with those regulations, laws, and the small things. But later in my career, in my firefighting career, I started to plan for this, these tunnels, subway stations. I switched my view to large scale disasters. So why I need to talk about this experience? Because later in my slides, I will talk about the difference. Because a lot of people, when they plan for disasters, they normally have a question, should we plan for the large scale disasters or should we focus more on the emergencies, like everyday emergencies, or for example, like a car accident? So my working experience perfectly will demonstrate what should be the focus for planning for disasters. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so today, the outline of my presentation, again, I'm going to spend 20 minutes talk about my experience and research on planning for disasters. And also, everything I talk about, I will, aid the citations on the slide. So if you want to further understand what I'm doing or the research results, you can follow the citation. So the outline for my presentation today is why, what, who, and how to plan for emergencies. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so first we start with the why. So in emergency management, we normally say there are 4 phases of emergency management. So the first one, we mitigate the impacts of hazards, right? So in this phase, we conduct the urban planning, we create the laws and the regulations. So the next phase is preparedness. So based on those laws and the regulations, we build during the mitigation phase, we start to make the disaster plans. For example, like those emergency operations plans I created in Taiwan. Then based on the plans, we provide the trainings. Then after we have the plans, we have the training courses. We organize the exercise to test our plans and trainings. So again, why we need to plan for emergencies? Because plan play a very important role in the disaster preparedness. And the disaster preparedness is actually part of the emergency management cycle, right? Because it's one of the 4 phases of emergency management. So planning is very important. I remember last time people discussed with me, how can we prevent for the next emergencies? I say you cannot prevent emergencies, but you can prepare for them. So making plans is a first step to prepare your organizations, to prepare your students or prepare your employees for the next emergencies. So the very, very important thing is these 4 phases, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery, they actually influence each other, which means the laws and the regulations you made during the mitigation phase would influence how you prepare for disaster, right? So those ways, those methods you prepare for disasters would influence how you respond to disasters. So again, how you respond to disasters would also determine how you recover from disasters. So these 4 phases, actually, if you read the FEMA website, they are like a cycle, right? So they influence each other. This is very important. So later, I'm going to demonstrate some examples to you. So next slide, please. So for example, for some of you might know, in the United States, when we respond, we means first responders respond to disasters. They need to follow a system called incident command system, right? So the incident command system is a disaster response system. But again, when I worked in Taiwan, my fire chief told me, hey, Ray, go to, translate those ICS documents into Chinese and try to introduce this system to Taiwan. But actually, it's very hard. Again, there are 4 phases of emergency management, right? So we have mitigation, we have preparedness, we have response, we have recovery. So although ICS is a response system, it doesn't mean you can just copy and paste the system to Taiwan, because once you change something in the response phase, you will automatically change the other 3 phases of emergency management. So to successfully introduce a response system or to successfully change the response system in Taiwan, you need to look at the different phrases, right? You need to look at the old phrases and think about the different methods, like how you are going to change to mitigate the impacts of disasters, how you are going to change the preparedness and the recovery. Okay, so this is the first example based on my working experience. Second is I talked to someone, the director of security for the Taipei 101, the high-rise building. So he said, actually, every year we invited professors to visit our, place and they provide the suggestions. But many times professors come up with the different suggestions. So again, if we do not look at the emergency management as a cycle, sometimes you might provide the suggestions in the different directions. For example, some professors in the civil engineering would say, okay, you need to build a wall here to stop the possible flooding, right? But another professor with more like a firefighting or disaster management backgrounds would say, no, you cannot build a wall here because that would impede the evacuation, right? So again, when we look at the emergency management, we need to realize that all phrases, they link together and they would influence to each other. They are like a cycle. So we cannot only talk about one specific phrase. We need to talk about the whole thing, right? So I will provide more examples later. So next page, please. Right, so another challenge when we plan for disasters, that is very important. We need to realize that when we plan for something, it's different than we implement something, right? So for example, in a research I conducted, I tried to interview the emergency managers in the state of Oklahoma. When I asked them, hey, do you update your building codes? Because recently, in recent years, we start to find an earthquake in Oklahoma, right? In the state of Oklahoma. A senior emergency manager in Oklahoma actually told us, we have state building codes, but we do not have people to enforce these codes, right? So what happened here is, again, if you only look at one specific phase of emergency management, like you look at the mitigation, you have the cool codes, you have a good building codes, but you forgot you also need to change the preparedness. You need to change the response and the recovery. So even you have a good codes, good building codes, you still need to make sure you have enough people to enforce that, or you will lose the trust from your citizens. So this is another example, and I attach the citation here. It's actually a paper I published in 2018. So if you are interested, you can welcome to download that and ask more questions later, right? So back to my working experience, when I planned for the longest tunnel in Taiwan, I talked to the Ministry of Transportation in Taiwan. She asked me, so why maintaining the tunnel is more expensive than construction, right? So why is more expensive to maintain a tunnel than build a new one, right? So the reason is very easy, right? Because if you look at the disaster management cycle, right, to maintain a tunnel, actually you need to mitigate the possible hazards. You need to prepare for the hazards. You need to also prepare for the response and also prepare for the recovery. So it will cost a lot, right? Even much more than you build a new one, right? So next page, please. So give you a more like a easy example in the higher education fields. We also observe the same thing. So again, these two pictures I took from my previous institute, right? When I was a professor there, we found many times we have a lot of like successful alumni. They like to donate the buildings. But again, after they donate the buildings, the university need to take care of these buildings. So these buildings, you can see these two pictures, they actually were built not to save energy, right? So once they build these buildings, then they hand these buildings to the universities. They create a very heavy burdens to the universities to pay the energy bills, right? So the very fundamental idea is fancy glass windows might not save energies, right? Especially my previous institute was in a very, very high temperature state, right? So you can also see your picture like on the bottom, right? You can see, oh, the alumni think maybe in this young generation might need this space. You can see how small is the table, right? But actually, right now, the younger generation is quite different than, the generation without the cell phones, right? Right now, everybody have a, small screen on their pockets. So in this kind of situation, they donate the buildings, but universities need to take care of that. So actually maintaining these buildings are more expensive than build these buildings. So my previous institute actually had problems on maintaining these energy bills, right? So although we have lots of new buildings on the campus, based on my president in that time, he said we actually do not have enough money to pay off every energy bill every month. So that created a very, very, heavy burden for us. So next page, please. So another challenge in here, why we plan for disaster is many people actually do not realize there is a gap between training and the exercise, right? So for many times, people were curious on, okay, when we plan for disasters, we need to plan for those common emergencies, or we need to think about the extreme situations. So even for the professional, for the emergency managers, they also have the question on their mind. For example, a city mayor asked me if a missile strikes a high-rise building in Taipei City, how can we plan for that, right? So similarly, after the Ukraine war, right, the Taiwanese government is preparing for some wartime scenarios. So they asked me, so during the wartime scenarios, how can we do emergency response or emergency recovery? So again, if we understand emergency management is actually a cycle, right? It includes the different components. We can understand emergency management is not just prepare for or respond to a moment, right? So before the missile attack to the high-rise building, you must have some time. You must understand, you can buy some time to do some like a warning system. You can evacuate your citizens. So very important thing is when we plan for emergencies, we cannot only plan for the moment. We need to think about a bigger picture. We need to think about the different tools we can use during the disaster mitigation, preparedness, response, and the recovery. Again, I'm not here to teach emergency management, but I think this is very interesting. If we see the bigger picture, the larger picture, we actually have a lot of tools to use for disaster preparedness. Okay, next page, please. Okay, so the final gap is, remember at the beginning of my presentation, I talked about my working experience. So I started with a very fundamental position, like the first level manager, the lieutenant for fire station. So in that time, I look at the SOPs, I care about those regulations, those managerial regulations. So in that time, all I focused were about the discipline, right? So I need to follow the rules. I need to plan for everything. But actually, later when I got promotion and I become like a second level manager, start to plan it for the long tunnel and the subway stations, I start to realize not everything can be predicted, right? So in that time when I planned it for the large scale disasters, for example, like those emergencies or disasters happen in tunnels, I need to become more agility, right? Which means I need to provide some spaces for my first responders to think and improvise, right? So again, when you look at the smaller scales of emergencies, you need more discipline. For example, when you handle with the car accidents, then you can follow the SOPs. But when you handle with the high-rise building fire or the long tunnel disasters, you need to give the disaster planners or emergency managers some spaces for them to improvise. So agility versus discipline is very important. And the key is to understand the processes of transferring from discipline to agility. So again, I'm not the first person to talk about this idea. I incorporate a citation on the bottom of this slide. So if you are interested, you can search this paper and read some discussions about the agility versus discipline. Next page, please. Okay, so I finished why parts. Then next, I want to talk about what to plan for emergencies, right? What to plan. So many emergency managers in the United States or in Taiwan actually carry a very strong firefighting backgrounds, right? So there is nothing wrong with firefighting backgrounds because myself, I also, come from the firefighters background. But again, when we plan for disasters, it's very important is we cannot only plan for those relevant to fires. So let me say again, we cannot only plan for those events with fires, right? Because if we utilize a fire-centric disaster planning method, we would focus heavily on response and prepare for response, which happened about 40 years ago in the United States, right? So it is very important for us to realize being a fire officer is different than being an emergency manager. So that is also what I'm trying to do to aid more emergency management components to my current programs, to help my firefighting students jump out of the box, to help my students without firefighting backgrounds to realize some emergency management elements. So again, I published a paper, talk about the difference between the fire officer and the emergency managers. I attach the link on the bottom of this slide. So if you are interested, you can see more discussions on that. I basically analyze the major textbooks of fire service administration and the emergency management, try to realize what are the difference between these two positions, these two jobs. Okay, next page, please. Okay, so what to plan for emergencies? So again, I say we cannot only plan for those fire relevant events. So what to plan for emergencies? So you can see the picture on your right-hand side. It's actually a sample of the 17 different pictures, right? This is actually, I downloaded it from the Florida State Office of Emergency Management. They talk about there are some emergency support functions, which means no matter what type of disasters, like a volcano, like a flooding, fire, or even car accident, no matter what type of the emergencies or disasters, you still need to do the same thing, right? You still need to do, build the communication system. You still need to build the disaster response system. You still need to transport your patients to the hospital, right? So these emergency support functions are universal to the different types of emergencies, which means if we can prepare, we can plan for these emergency support functions, or ESFs, we can prepare for every disasters. So this is very important. In emergency management field, we say this is the all hazards reports, which means you do not only look at the specific type of disasters, you prepare for those universal functions. You prepare for example, like the emergency medical services, right? You focus more on how to transport the impacted people to hospitals. You prepare for those communication systems. You prepare for those energies issues. Then you can prepare to all types of disasters. So this is a better way to plan for disasters. So again, I attach a citation here. So if you want to learn more, you can read this article. Next one, please. So finally, who should be involved in planning is very important. Yes, again, I say there are some ESFs universal to different types of disasters, but fire department cannot handle with these functions alone, right? So we need to invite people from different backgrounds to join us. So I just talk about two examples here. So first, when I researched the Oklahoma earthquake planning, everybody talk about, oh, you need to talk to the Oklahoma City Planning Department because we rely on this department. But when I interview this department, and they say, what? I even know I'm in their plans, right? So another example is when I research for the sea level rise, which is an emergent risk in Hawaii. Everybody talk about the Harbor Department of Transportation. Again, the Harbor Department of Transportation say, sorry, I don't know, I ain't even, in this plan. So again, citations is on the bottom. So it's very interesting is when people plan for disasters, they do not actually invite people to join the discussions. Okay, because of time, I want to move faster. So sorry if you are interested in any details, welcome to talk to me. Okay, so finally, how to plan for emergencies. So first of all, we need to be careful on that. No matter how hard we try, there are always something unexpected. For example, the picture shows two disasters in Taiwan. So in the up picture, it shows an airplane, drop in the river and just on the border between the two jurisdictions. So even we had the exercise for airplane crash, no one can expect it. The airplane would actually drop at the border between the two jurisdictions. So the picture on the bottom show you actually there is a tragedy, right? Because people apply the colorful powder everywhere. Once the powder caught on fire, it can explode very fast. And I think about this is a water theme park, right? Can you imagine that? You went to a water theme park and it get burned by the fire, right? So again, there are so many unexpected situations. So the rule of thumb is you also need to think about those unexpected situations and be prepared. Next, please. So my conclusion is I like this picture, this cycle. Is actually from the Department of Homeland Security. When you prepare for the disasters, you need to jump out of the box and you need to learn from the different disciplines. You need to learn from other experts and you need to link plan training and exercise. So again, we already researched disasters for a couple of years. If possible, when you plan for disasters, you need to apply more emergency management research to planning. So my final slides, I want to show you something very interesting. Next slide, please. When I made this presentation, I asked the chat GPT, tell me some challenges on planning for emergencies. So the chat GPT actually gave me 7 points and 5 of them already being covered in my presentation. And the other 2 points I printed to talk about. So that shows us the ChatGPT, the OpenAI can actually can actually understand the general concepts of a specific topic, which is really amazing for me. Okay, so this is my presentation, and I want to thank you very much for your attention. And this is my email. Welcome to discuss with me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. You know what I like a lot about your presentation, and I guess the both of our presentations for homecoming, is that it incorporates sort of both perspectives. So from an organization, what they can do to prepare for emergencies, but then also what I'm going to talk about of the individual. So, you know, how the individual compare mentally and physically to be able to respond to emergencies. So I'm going to focus on sleep is my main area of research, and but I want to take a step back and kind of show the overall picture of health and well-being. So the medical field has really coined, I guess, 4 pillars that equates to good health. And so, I mean, these shouldn't be unknown, but, you know, physically active, having good diet, so nutrition is great, mental wellness, and sleep. So each of these areas in emergency responders, and where I kind of typically focus is on the firefighter level. You know, these areas are generally understudied and not really thought of until recent years. So physically active, there are a lot of departments that don't have physical activity programs. Same thing with nutritional programs, either eating, you know, good in or bad in, bad out, right? And so having a diet or a nutritional program can help improve firefighter health. Same thing with mental wellness. Actually, this has really changed within the last few years, probably right as COVID started to occur, with breaking stigmas, not just in the fire service, but you know, worldwide as well. Here in the fire service, there is a you know, continued trend on suicide, and so there's you know, that issue that we have to continue to fight. And then sleep. Sleep is more the recent one, and this is an area that is probably most understudied and unknown in the fire service. I'll get to a little bit later, where a lot of information has been generalized into the fire service from like the medical field, for example, and military. But there are a lot of issues when we kind of bring that stuff into the fire service. So just to give you a spider web of sleep relationships, and many of these are bidirectional, but you know, mental health, the top left box, and the top right box of physical health, these are really a lot of things that sleep can affect and what can affect sleep. So from mental health, you know, acute stress, anxiety, and PTSD all kind of impact sleep, and then sleep can exacerbate these areas of concern. Physical health of obesity, depressed immune function, and cardiovascular disease is also pretty predominant. We don't have a lot of the research on these acute and chronic health effects in the fire service, but a lot of it comes from what we know of the general population. Individual behaviors are big ones too, where you know, alcohol and drugs or any type of stimulant. You know, alcohol is a good one, for example, that you know, it may help one become drowsy, but it really impacts the quality of sleep later in the night. So there's more tossing and turning, and REM sleep and non-REM stages of sleep, especially the deeper stages of sleep. There's a lot of sleep fragmentation that occur at those particular levels. So while perceived alcohol helps one fall asleep, it really does more damage than good. So having some type of a mechanism or mitigation strategies for individual behaviors would be good. There are also other things that from the organizational level that can impact sleep. So organizational characteristics, and these are basically at the very top level of you know, the working patterns, the shift start time, and maybe even workload that can impact someone's ability or opportunity to sleep. And then same thing here on the right where it's sleeping environments. So most of the time, a firefighter could have at least two sleeping environments. So your sleep at home and then your sleep at work. But there are firefighters that will rotate stations. And so they have multiple sleeping environments at work. And especially if they're maybe new and trading shifts or rotating stations, that entire environment is different, and also the subculture at that station. So you could see how if maybe they're uneasy or slowly transitioning into the fire service, it could impact sleep. And of course, most of why we care about sleep is what's at the very bottom, right? What are the symptoms or impacts that sleep has on performance, and physically and cognitively? So muscle strength and endurance. An all-nighter is going to have impact on both physical performance and cognitive performance. So reaction time, memory recall, and alertness. There are conversations that you can have with firefighters, and especially if they're a driver and they don't recall how they got to the scene of emergency, and that's kind of scary. So I throw this picture up to make 2 points. There's 2 great studies. They're a little bit older now that shows. They slowly got people, or slowly intoxicated people, and had a study that measured their performance equivalent and how they operated during simulated tests. And it shows at 0.5 blood alcohol concentration, performance occurred when they were up for 17 hours. Then at 24 hours, they had a blood alcohol content equivalent of 0.10. And so that's would be legally intoxicated in every state in the US. So just staying up for 24 hours, your performance is as if you were drunk. And so, we would think that, oh, that's not going to happen in the fire service or anything like that. But if you just Google, EMS sleep deprivation crash, you'll find countless of cases. And there are even cases that occur right outside the emergency department, just feet away from that room. And so you could see that there's a very real issue on sleep deprivation, not just for EMS personnel, but firefighters as well. So what I mentioned earlier about, there's plenty of research on sleep in other fields, and most of it, a lot of it has stemmed from the medical field. So nurses, resident physicians, and miners, airline, truck drivers, all these other occupations have countless research articles and really even have mitigation strategies to at the individual level to look at and plan for how long one can work until they start to see adverse symptoms. The problem here is really comparing, apples to oranges. And there's 3 main areas that the fire service or fire emergency services differ from other occupations that make it very difficult to generalize that research into the fire service. And that's function, workload, and work duration. So the function, the specific tasks that firefighters and EMS perform are very different than what you would see in, say, a hospital or within a individual department. So those that are assigned to an ambulance or rescue compared to a truck company, their function is going to be very different. Workload, and that kind of ties into workload, whereas a private EMS may work 12 hours straight and have 12 hours straight of calls, whereas maybe a fire station or a less busy fire station may have ups and downs in their workload. And then the duration is also the same, where someone could be on shift for 12 hours, 8 hours, or 24, 72, or 48 hours. That really depends on the department. So when you start to mix and match these 3 areas, you can really start to think about how difficult it would be to generalize something as comparing nurses to firefighters. So let's get into a little bit of what kind of sleep looks like. And so I really focus on sleep process. So that's like the sleep-wake cycle, timing, and irregularities in their sleep pattern. So this would be considered normal sleep for the average individual. go to bed at 10 p.m. and then wake up at 6 a.m. So here there's about 8 hours of sleep. That's what the pink and green is representing sleep. Blue is spikes of activity. And then yellow over here is registered light on actigraphy devices. So just ignore the yellow for now. So here's an example of a firefighter's sleep. Here they went to bed at midnight. You could see a spike in activity right before it. Generally corresponds to either getting off the couch or recliner and preparing for bed. They get in bed, go to sleep, have a little bit of toss and turn, but this blue section over here is responding to a call. Then they come back to the station, sleep a bit, have another call, come back to the station and sleep until they end their shift at a little bit after 6 o'clock. And this department was about 7 o'clock, but they woke up a little early to clean trucks and do last minute paperwork before they left. Here's another example where they went to bed a little bit before 11 a.m. and then they had a call that lasted quite a bit of time. When they got back to their station, they couldn't fall asleep even though they tried to. And that just instead they went to work out. And so here they ended their call at a pretty decent time, but because of the type of call and how much it worked them up, they weren't able to really go back to bed and use that opportunity to get some sleep. And so that morning call before they left from work was a missed opportunity for sleep. Then we have a little bit of a both, but in this case, they tried to go to bed a little bit early. So pre-banking some sleep, which is more of a myth. It typically doesn't happen in a way that's productive. As you can see, there's some tossing and turning here, but they woke up to go to a call. They came back to the station, went to bed, and then had a significant amount of tossing and turning while sleeping. Got up to go to the bathroom, stayed up for a little bit, and then tried to go back to sleep, and then had a significant amount of tossing and turning before they ended their shift at 6 a.m. And so the result that we see on some of these cases where they're sleeping at work and then they go home, we could see something like this, where they're sleeping for almost 12 hours. And so here they're in bed at about 10 p.m. and they get out of bed a little bit before 10 a.m. But notice how little blue activity is occurring during that sleep. So there's little tossing and turning. They're out. So by looking at sleep actigraphy and trying to understand the sleep process of what occurs during a particular night, we can start to identify areas for mitigation strategies or treatment interventions to ensure that while they may not have the best opportunity to sleep, when they do have opportunity, we could try to figure out ways to make sure that they make the most out of it. And that occurs by looking at some actigraphy, which we just looked at. We could take that one step further and start to look at their sleep pattern tied to their shift schedule. And so this is another area of interest in mine of looking at the shift schedule. And this is the 24-48. So they work one day, and then they have 2 days off, and then that repeats. So it's a 3-day cycle. And so they work one, have 2 days off, work one, have 2 days off, and so forth. There's little minor variations of this with the Fair Labor Standard Act, but in general, it's a repeated cycle. What I want you to look at mostly is just look at the box plot of the boxes and the pattern, basically. So they're on shift this day, then they get home, and then they're home the second day, and then that repeats. So in bedtime is these red squares up here, and you'll notice that's pretty consistent. So they're going to bed same time no matter what. And this is generally pretty consistent with the sleep medicine literature. What's different is the triangles. So this is sleep offset, and this basically corresponds to commuting times. And we could start to see the relationship of if there's an early commute, it offsets sleep or truncates sleep on that day. When they're at the station, or I'm sorry, at home, they're able to get some sleep. But what we think that second day at home is, it's really, it's the worst sleep. So they get the worst sleep at home the night before going to work in this sample of firefighters, which was a little surprising. The next graph shows a a 48-96 shift schedule. And so this is, 6 days tour. And so they're on shift day 1, day 2, and then they have 4 days off. And you'll notice the same relationship occurs, that when they're at home, they get some sleep, but that night right before they're going back to work is their least amount of sleep. They're able to get some sleep on that first night at work, this first day here, just because they don't have to wake up early and commute. And so maybe this is a benefit of working this particular schedule if the workload is low enough where it's not going to impact their health. That is yet to be determined. That's one of a future research questions for another project. So with this information, we could start to think about, okay, what can be done, or what are some low-hanging fruit? And I like this quote a lot. And it's just because you feel comfortable with being uncomfortable does not mean you get quality sleep. And so this could apply to a lot of things in life, but sleep is one that, you don't really realize until, you finally have one great night of sleep versus, oh, it's less terrible. But think about when the last time that you had one great night of sleep, and start to think about that, how complacent we become. So in the sleeping environment, I talked about this at the very beginning, looking at the web of sleep. And there are a few things that we could do as a low-hanging fruit. And this can even apply to non-firefighters as well. So the first one, noise. In the fire station, there's lots of noise going on, as you can anticipate from other crews that may be in it, from other personnel, depending on how close they are in sleeping quarters, if it's a bunk room of cots or if it's individual sleeping quarters. But note that everyone has their own preference, and everyone will have their own preference to each of these. So if they have a noise maker or noise machine that they can install and set to their preference, that would be ideal. If they're designing or renovating stations, they can construct them with insulation in the walls and the ceilings, and even have acoustic dampering floors, and even be between the bottom of the door and the floor. You'd be surprised how much noise and sound carries through that little gap on tile floor. Doors, difference between solid and hardcore, or hollow and solid core doors. Placement. One of the fire stations that I was at back in, I think in 2014, they had their station located right next to train tracks that went by every 45 minutes. And so it was at an intersection, and you can just start to imagine how disruptive that would be at night to their sleep. But not just placement of the station in a city, but placement of the sleeping quarters within the station. And so if it's in front of, say, the bay where the trucks come out, here that you could see how that could be disruptive to sleep for those crews that aren't going out on a call. And so maybe having placement of the sleeping quarters a little bit away from the bay, or in general, just noise making equipment. Temperature. Oh, this is it's always, and I think it will always remain, an interesting one to discuss with a firefighter. Asking what the ideal temperature is for a group of firefighters is, unless it's a meat locker, they're not going to be happy. And note that your temperature is going to be different than someone else's temperature, who's going to be different than someone else's ideal temperature. And so as we transition from cot rooms or open bunk rooms to individual sleeping quarters, maybe there's systems that can have individual temperature settings to be able to adjust to your particular preference. But there are other ways, such as ventilation, to make sure that there are fans, ceiling fans, and even there's mattress covers that have the capability of adjusting temperature. I think ChiliPad is a company or technology that exists that can send water through the bottom mattress, and so it will cool the bed or heat the bed to your preference. Comfort, quality of sleeping materials. You'd be surprised at how often fire departments do not rotate mattresses, replace mattresses. Some of them are disgusting. Some of them are really nice, though. But again, the same thing is that everyone's preference is going to be their own. So the ability to set a maybe adjustable mattress firmness, having cleaning procedures, mattress protectors, rotating them, and then having a replacement policy in place to discard old mattresses and replace them. So well-being, privacy, this is one that's a lot of departments are, as they redevelop or remodel and design new stations, are going or transitioning to individual sleeping quarters. There's other research that I have ongoing that is looking at alarm systems and the benefits of just alerting the individual responding to an emergency rather than the entire crew being awoken. And so here there's sort of different styles. We can have just a complete open room, kind of already discussed that. A cubicle style, which is a little bit more private, but the noise, odor, temperature, that's hard to adjust. And then you have maybe more towards the individual sleeping quarters on the far right. And then light. So light is, again, another preference to the individual on either low light, having ambient light, or whatever they view as comfortable. So blackout curtains would be great, cheap alternative to having troffer lights or dimming features. Replacing those lights with red lights, and especially ones that can brighten or ramp up lights when a call comes in, so it doesn't shock them awake. Having lights that are also dimmable and timed appropriately for evening, especially if a firefighter is getting up to go to the bathroom and those lights are a different style of brightness and temperature that could be impactful to sleep. And then having them properly motion activated, so you're not waking up other firefighters, or that you're just having on for the right amount of time. So all this information is important for firefighters, but also to use that to develop the next study. And so here we really want to look at both acute and chronic health effects of sleep and lack of sleep in a variety of populations in the fire service. So one area or two areas that haven't really received any attention at all are volunteers and wildland firefighters. And so they have to balance quite a bit of work with their other job, and then also their life. And so having consolidated shifts or tours for wildland firefighters can really make sleeping quite difficult. Sleeping locations isn't always easy, especially if you're rotating stations or sleeping out in the field during those tours. But also at the individual, the organizational level, such as maybe looking at shift start time. So this remains an open research question that hopefully we'll get a department to do a trial. But looking at seeing if we can adjust the shift start time that has or allows for a more consistent sleep pattern. Here we want to make sure that we're not interfering with commute times or rush hour, because we don't want to trade that time with standing in traffic or waiting in traffic. So that's a little bit tricky to work with individual departments. Just like a shift schedule is going to be a department specific decision, I think this will also be a department specific situation, especially the difference between metropolitan areas and more rural areas. And of course, this information needs to be disseminated and policies need to be developed and then evaluated after a set period of time to determine if it's working, if adjustments are needed, and if we can justify more spending for these mitigation or treatment interventions. Now, some of the next steps we have are updating an official report for the fire service. So the document here on the left side is back in 2007 from the I-Chiefs, and that report will be updated in a couple years. I just got a grant for this research, and it will be one that's going to have tailored and specific guidance for firefighters and EMS responders. If there's any students that are interested in joining this research, I do have an open position for a research assistant. Just contact me at my email address and we can chat. Otherwise, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Joel and Ray, again, for such a splendid presentation. Dr. Siedschlag did have to excuse himself, so he extends his apologies. However, he wants to congratulate the both of you for participating in this. And do we have any immediate questions? If you would like, you can unmute your mic or you can throw them in the chat. And if not, if nothing immediately comes up, however, you would like to contact both Ray and Joel, they will go ahead and put their emails into the chat. This recording will also be sent out, and if possible, the presentation can also be sent out to everyone as well. That way they can kind of double check the resources that you are all offering, and maybe they can address any questions that you all may have at a later time. So if anyone doesn't have anything right now, I will go ahead and conclude this conversation. So thank you again, Joel and Ray, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And I hope everyone has a splendid rest of their afternoon. Thank you.